What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined always by my man in the corner, producer Nick Belsky. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talkers. Subscribe anywhere you get your podcast, the Pittsburgh Steelers. We continue to ride the wave of July, but we are getting closer every week. We are officially, 2 weeks out? 3 weeks out of training camp, which is wild times, exciting times for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And there's plenty to talk about, whether it's the cornerback position, a quarterback battle that not everybody believes is as real as others do, and then a very bold prediction for the Pittsburgh Steelers running back situation as we head into 2024. As we say every single episode, please make sure that you're dropping in all your questions, because at the end of the show, we would love to answer all of them as we go through, the dry time, but there's still plenty to talk about and there's still plenty to know. So if you need anything, if you want anything answered, please make sure that you drop it in the chat. Nick, it's a beautiful day here in the Berg. 4th of July weekend has come and gone. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling great, and you mentioned 4th of July weekend. It was a warm one, so I'll throw that back to you. I know you're not somebody that likes these extreme heat temperatures. It was 90 degrees at 9:01 at my house the other day. So how are you feeling? Because this feels like it might be a weekend that might have melted you a little bit.
Yeah, I spent a lot of weekend inside. I will say that. I've walked outside, and I go for walks every day, but those walks are rough. My problem is, and nobody cares about this, but I'll say it anyways. My problem is that I go for a walk in the morning every day in my house, like on a treadmill, do 30 minutes of a little walking, get the articles edited and do what I got to do. That's how I start my day. But then I'm in a sweatshirt and I go outside and I'm like, wow, I'm ready to die. And it's awful. The day just gets worse from there. So now 90 degrees, it could go away. I'm ready for not cold, but just like a firm, crisp 75. That would be
football weather.
Football weather would be nice. And on those days where we get it, it's truly a blessing. Let's talk some Pittsburgh Steelers football here. Plenty to dive into, especially a busy weekend when it came to hot takes, some insiders tossing out, some names that could come, some names that might be a little overhyped, and then obviously some bold predictions when it comes to those on the roster. We'll start with the familiar face, a familiar name that could make its way or his way back to the Pittsburgh Steelers. The Athletics Pittsburgh Steelers insider Mark Caboli said that he believes that cornerback Patrick Peterson might be a name to watch as the Pittsburgh Steelers go through training camp. This is what he said on 93.7 The Fan, quote, "I think he could be. It all depends on what happens in training camp. See if Corey Trice can be able to play. See how Dante Jackson plays. See if anybody gets hurt. He's one of those guys where you can easily make the call and say, come on in here and we need you. But if you don't need him, then why grab him right now?" I think that goes with a lot of those guys across the board. Those are guys who are not top of the priority list right now, but they may become pretty important here come late August. Patrick Peterson has been a name that everybody has tossed out, asked questions. Hey, can the Steelers re-sign him? Should they re-sign him? He was probably very close to the top of the list when or before Cam Sutton signed or re-signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers. He's still a free agent. There are a lot of names that are still a free agent on the cornerback market that you look at and say, maybe the Steelers could consider them because they are a former All-Pro, former Pro Bowler. I mean, Stephon Gilmore is still floating around out there. Patrick Peterson's still floating around out there. There's some big names out there. 35 years old. I don't know how quickly you're touching these names. This is my thing with Patrick Peterson. I think it makes sense. And I think if the Steelers want Patrick Peterson back, why not go get Patrick Peterson back? He'd clearly like to come back to the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he said before that if he's going to come back, he's not going to come back to be a backup. He wants to be a starter. That's where things get very interesting, and the conversation, I believe, starts. Is very simply, if you're going to bring back Patrick Peterson, even at the end of August, so let's say that Corey Trice is still a developmental piece, that Darius Rush is still a developmental piece, and you're looking for a really strong backup in Patrick Peterson, it has to come with the conversation that Patrick Peterson could get passed up during the season, that you have to inform the veteran that Corey Trice and Darius Rush are not ready to be a cornerback 3 right now, if that's the case come August. That doesn't mean that they won't be ready to be a cornerback 3 by the end of the season. And if they are ready to be a cornerback 3 by the end of the season, Patrick Peterson is the name that takes a back seat, because you're not going to halt development for guys who are ready. You could halt development for guys that are going to hurt your football team, and that could be Corey Trice and Darius Rush if neither of them are ready by the start of the season. But by the end of the year, where they go, how far they come, is going to be the conversation that you have to have with Patrick Peterson. Because quite frankly, unless he's out there 5-6 interceptions, he is a lockdown corner off the bench. You can't stop 34-year-old Patrick Peterson. There's no point in him maintaining any sort of role if you have somebody younger ready to step in. That's my argument. That's my only conversation that I think the Steelers need to have in this. It has nothing to do with, hey, Corey, hey, Darius, we're signing this guy, you're going to take a back seat. The conversation needs to be, hey, Pat, we're going to sign you. You're going to be our cornerback 3. You're going to provide depth on the outside and the inside. The second that Corey Trice or Darius Rush or Beanie Bishop is ready to take on a bigger role is the second that you take a step backwards. I hope you're okay with that. If that's the conversation that is had with Pittsburgh and with Patrick Peterson, do you think that it works out? Do you think Pat P comes in here with an open mind like that? And do you think the Steelers have any shot of having that conversation and bringing a guy like Patrick Peterson back, or does that close everything off?
It's all up to Patrick Peterson at this point, because if you look at the Steelers, you know that's exactly the line of thinking that they have. Otherwise, they would have brought Pat Pete in before minicamp. They would have brought him in during OTAs and said, all right, we don't know if these guys are going to be ready. We want you here just in case. As of right now, it's these guys are, in the Steelers' eyes, these guys are ready until proven that they're not. And of course, the big thing is going to be in Latrobe when they put on pads. What does Corey Trice look like? What does Darius Rush look like whenever things start to get a little bit more serious, whenever practices start to get a little bit more intense? And that's going to be the determining factor. And once they do, and if they look fine, I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers still reached out to Pat Pete and said, hey, do you want to be the Miles Jack option? If something goes wrong, or if these guys, go a little bit further and they still need a little bit more seasoning, are you that Miles Jack option for us? Or, nobody's holding you up from going somewhere else. So I think it's all in Pat Pete's court at this point in time, because I think the Steelers know what they have at the moment and they know where they stand. And that is with Patrick Peterson being a luxury item that they really don't need at the moment.
Yeah, I agree. I think Pat P can go anywhere. I think the market for a cornerback will heat up come August when teams realize that they need somebody here, need somebody there. There are a lot of guys out there, and there are names outside of Patrick Peterson. I mean, Akello Witherspoon's still sitting in the free agency market, and I'm sorry, but I'm a big Akello fan. Like, I think that he deserves a shot somewhere. But that's where we are, is guys are not going to get an opportunity until that opportunity presents itself later in training camp. Patrick Peterson will make the most sense for the Steelers if they need somebody. And I have to take a guess that they're going to. I mean, Corey Trice, we didn't get to see anything in team during OTAs and minicamp. Darius Rush looked good the first week of OTAs. He started to die off by the end of minicamp. They'll both get strong opportunities, but the Steelers don't have that solid number 3 behind Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson. And they also don't have an inside option behind Cam Sutton. And Anthony Everett, yeah, hopefully he turns into something, but he wasn't impressive during OTAs or minicamp. Beanie Bishop wasn't impressive during OTAs or minicamp. I look at it and say Patrick Peterson fills 2 roles because he could be versatile and play the inside and the outside. And if the Steelers look at him as that backup piece, it makes a lot of sense. And you're going to get him for cheap. I mean, come August, Patrick Peterson's not going for anything. He's just excited to play football again, rack up $1 million, $2 million and come to the Pittsburgh Steelers. And at the same time, you get a very reliable cornerback 3, which is what the Steelers want. If Patrick Peterson was their cornerback 3 last year and they had somebody else besides Levi Wallace opposite of Joey Porter Jr., that cornerback room would be phenomenal. And that's where they are now. And if you could help Corey Trice develop, that's the other part of Patrick Peterson, is if you could help Corey Trice and Darius Rush develop with a guy like that, that certainly helps. And I mean, I remember talking to Darius Rush last year, the day after he showed up in Pittsburgh, and he was telling me that Patrick Peterson already was breaking down tape with them and staying late after practice. And that's who Pat P is. That being said, you have to be open-minded to the point where the Steelers want Darius Rush and Corey Trice to be those guys moving forward, and they have to give them opportunities at some point to toss themselves into the fire. It's just a matter of, you're not going to risk having a bad defense or a missing piece to your secondary because you want guys to develop that might not develop. You're taking a shot in the dark there. That's where it gets iffy with Patrick Peterson. I think he's still on the table. I think Kaboli's timeline is spot on. Middle to end of August is where I predict that going down when they do make a move, if they do make a move. And, we'll see what happens from there. Got more to talk about, including the quarterbacks. Very excited about this hot take. But first, I want to answer Michael's question here. Appreciate you as always. Do you think this year's rookie class can make a bigger impact than last year's rookie class? He thinks so. Troy and Zach Frazier are going to be studs. People sleeping on both Peyton and Roman Wilson. I don't think it makes a bigger impact than last year's. I thought Broderick Jones and Joey Porter Jr. were as good as it gets, and Keanu Benton is even better, and their impact was massive and maybe overlooked because the Steelers struggled, but I thought all three of them were so big. And then Nick Herbig's development, I don't know. I thought that rookie class was one of the best I've seen in Pittsburgh in a long, long time. I don't expect Troy Fautanu to be a starter in week one. Where we currently sit right now, that could change come training camp, but where we currently sit, I look at it that way. Zach Frazier, I think, is going to have a massive impact. Roman Wilson and Peyton Wilson are still to be decided, especially Roman Wilson. He's got a lot of development in front of him. How far can he go before the start of the season? Peyton Wilson, people are sleeping on. That guy's going to be a monster. I'm still going to go last year's rookie class. I'm thinking this year's rookie class will have good impact. Last year's rookie class is hard to match, though. Do you feel differently, the same? What's your thoughts there?
No, especially whenever you look at how quickly Broderick Jones was able to assimilate to the right side last year and how important that was for the Pittsburgh Steelers, because Chooks was, and when we talked about Dan Moore on the right side and how bad that looked, Chooks, I don't know what happened to him last year, because even when he was playing, it was worse than we had seen before. So the need and the immediate, ascension of Broderick Jones was so massive for the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line last year. And he saw a couple of games where they ran for 200 yards on the ground. And that was a large part due to the fact that Broderick Jones was able to step in and be a plus starter from day one on the right side, which is on his offside. So I think it's going to be hard for them to match, simply because, like you mentioned, the level and the bar is set so high from last year's draft class.
Yeah, I agree. What they did last year was massive. I'm going last year's rookie class. I hope I'm wrong, but I'm going last year's rookie class. It would be nice. All right, let's talk about a hot take from Pittsburgh Steelers insider when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback competition. This is from Pittsburgh Post-Gazette's Ray Fittipaldo, team insider, guy who's got plenty of insight on this team, but also at the same time has tossed out a couple of hot takes this summer that I hate talking about on the show because I love Ray and I'm a big fan. I want Ray. Ray has offered to come on this podcast more than once, and we will get him on this podcast. And I hope that he drops some bombs like this. I hope that he does. Speaking on 93.7 The Fan, again, he said, quote, a lot of the quarterback competition has to do with agents and what they feed to national reporters. I think Justin Fields' agent wants people to believe that Justin is in this and that he's still a viable quarterback on the open market. Whatever happens this year, whether he's sitting on the bench all season, I think his agent wants to keep his name hot. It's only natural for your rep to do this. Part of this is on the Steelers too, right? Because Wilson and Fields are both only signed to 1-year contracts. The Steelers quarterback competition, an agent-produced competition. Let me tell you why I agree with that and why I do not agree with that, because I think there are both sides here. I do agree with that because I don't think that Justin Fields is really in the running for a quarterback one spot in Pittsburgh this summer. I think we will talk about it. I have already been instructed to track every single pass that both of these quarterbacks throw during training camp, which I've done in years past, and it is awful. It's fun for the first week. By the end of it, you're going, all right, dude, I get it. Justin Fields went 8 for 12, and Russell Wilson went 8 for 11. I don't care, and neither does anybody else. But that's how nationally important this quarterback competition is going to be. If you ask Mike Tomlin in closed quarters, off the record, in a dark room where no one else will ever hear the conversation that you two are having, he will likely tell you that there is no quarterback competition and that Russell Wilson is your week 1 starter, and they already know that because Kevin Dotson knew 4 months before the regular season that Mitch Trubisky was going to be the starter, no matter how many times Mike Tomlin and Mitch Trubisky and Kenny Pickett and Mason Rudolph tried to convince you otherwise. That's the Steelers. That will remain the Steelers. I don't think that Fittipaldo's wrong there. I think Justin Fields is a guy who's 25 years old and wants an opportunity to play in the NFL after the season and start somewhere. And even if it's not Pittsburgh, his agent is trying to keep his name as relevant as humanly possible so that he doesn't become the next guy who falls off the map and becomes a lifelong backup in the NFL. He's going to try to avoid that. And it happens no matter how big your name is in the NFL. I mean, RG3 is a perfect example. Injuries, I get it. But even when RG3 fell off, it was injury-ridden. His name was still big enough where chances are he should have got a shot somewhere. He didn't. It happens all the time. Why I disagree with this is that I don't think the Steelers are giving up on Justin Fields as much as this somewhat makes it sound. I think that the Steelers want Justin Fields to develop this season. I still think that the Steelers want to get an opportunity to see what Justin Fields can bring to the table in the next 2 years, not just this season. And their plan might not be for a real quarterback competition this season, but it might be for Justin Fields to compete against whoever next season and be in pole position to win that job over rookie or off-season signing or whoever. That's my expectations. And yeah, Justin Fields' agent wants to keep his name hot, but I don't think that in the grand scheme of this isn't a real quarterback competition, it's as dramatic as it sounds, because I do think that the Steelers want Justin Fields to take steps forward, even if this is not a real quarterback competition. In their head, there are objectives for him to hit. He's not just a waste of space here in Pittsburgh who's not going to do anything. So I think there are two sides to this, a side that I agree with, the side that I do not agree with. But I do think that Justin Fields' time in Pittsburgh does not technically start in my head until next offseason. Because if he signs an extension, that's when he becomes a real competition for the Steelers or a real competitor for the Steelers. This year, it's more of a, keep his toes high. And I get it. His agent's got to do what he's got to do. But I look at him as a piece of the puzzle for the future for the Steelers this season, more just a test subject to see what they got. Am I spitting nonsense? Good.
Yeah, through no fault of his own, Justin Fields is going to be the loudest backup quarterback in the National Football League this year. And it's not, again, none of it's going to be because he's out there saying anything, because not only do you have his agent who is doing his job and making sure that, hey, we're going to keep Justin's name in the national spotlight, so he has options next summer. If he doesn't like the way that Pittsburgh is treating him as this situation goes forward, then he has somewhere else that he can land, and he's not just stuck trusting that the Pittsburgh Steelers have, his future at top of mind. And then you also have to think about Hard Knocks and how much that is just going to make him one of the noisiest backups, especially at that point of the season. We'll know, is Russell Wilson good or is it Russell Wilson bad? And if Russell Wilson is struggling and yet still starting, it is only going to get louder as the season goes on. I don't think that's going to happen, but again, that is still a possibility. So it makes sense that they're going to continue to bring this up. They're going to continue to leak that, this is a competition. We're going into this. There's some open minds in the Pittsburgh Steelers front office that want to see Justin overtake. We're going to see all of that. And I think it makes sense. And I think it's expected, especially when you foster the environment of having both guys on 1-year contracts at vastly different points in their career.
Yes, that is spot on. They are going to be the loudest quarterback competition all season long. Russell Wilson will throw one interception, and the national media will be talking about should the Pittsburgh Steelers turn to Justin Fields. Stephen A. Smith will be screaming on First Take, arguing with somebody, probably agreeing that Justin Fields should overtake Russell Wilson after one loss. Guaranteed takes one loss, and there it is. If the Steelers start 0-1 in Atlanta, it's over. It is over. They have to go undefeated for Russell Wilson not to feel the heat and the pressure of the national media. I agree with that 100%. That being said, the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't going to care because it's different. Last year, you looked at the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback competition, or in years past. Last year, definitely to some degree, but let's go with Mitch Trubisky. He starts the season, everybody wants Kenny Pickett, and the fans are booing, and, with Matt Canada last year, it's the fire Canada. This year, it's not going to be that dramatic. Nobody's going to sit in the stands and go, oh, man, dude, Russell Wilson just threw an interception, get Justin Fields on the field right now. No, they're going to look at both of these guys and say they have two competent quarterbacks. Let's see what we have in both of them. And Russell Wilson gets his fair share and his fair shot. I think it'll be outside noise, not inside noise this year, which will be much better. But I agree. It's going to be loud, very loud when it comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers quarterback competition and what they bring, which is, exciting for us. But at the same time, there's going to be a lot of hot takes that we just don't want to address. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers running back situation here. Former player Terrence Garvin, I always pronounce his name wrong, hopped on the Arthur Moats Experience the other day and talked about Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris, and he believes, this is his bold prediction, that Jaylen Warren is the guy. He is the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers running back position, and that by the end of the season, he's going to be the guy that they turn to and say, yep, nope, we have our guy. We don't even have to think about it moving forward. This is what he had to say, quote, he'll turn it up a bit. He'll turn up a bit more than he has. I think he does. I think he does because of business, and I think he does because of this running back play. I think the business element will allow him the success that you're looking for, to where you'll be able to say, we got the running back we need, and we'll get another one to follow him. I agree with that. I think by the end of the season, Jaylen Warren is the Pittsburgh Steelers running back one. That is no knock on Najee Harris. I have full faith Najee Harris will have a great year and continue to be a guy and hit free agency and earn some cash flow and hopefully a big contract somewhere else, but it won't be in Pittsburgh. Jaylen Warren will be cheap. He will be younger. He will be just as electric, and he will be a running back one for the first time with minimal miles on him, which is always a good thing, and an opportunity to find another Jaylen Warren for the Pittsburgh Steelers, which is equally as exciting, because getting a first-round running back is awesome. Finding Jaylen Warrens, finding James Connors, those types of guys, those backups that turn into starters, are what makes the NFL go round and what makes the Pittsburgh Steelers go round. And you could turn Jaylen into a running back one by the end of the season, as long as you have a good running back two. People are going to talk about his size. People are going to say things like, hey, guys, at this point, you'll be in year 4. Is that really the future? Yeah, I think it is. I think Jaylen is much bigger than his size says. I think he plays like a monster. He's as physical as they get. He's proportional, like there's Maurice Jones-Drew-ish. That's who he reminds me of, as a guy who could last 8 years in the NFL being a successful running back because he knows how to utilize his body correctly, and he plays with more strength than everybody. So I'm a big Jaylen Warren guy. I think Jaylen Warren is the running back one by the end of the season. And at that point, you go out and you go find another Jaylen Warren, which is just as exciting for the Pittsburgh Steelers in 2025. Meanwhile, Najee still does his thing, but at some point, the Steelers understand that Jaylen's the future and that he will be the top goer by the end of the year. Too much? Not enough?
I will say the one part of your rundown of the Steelers running back situation there that I think is easier said than done is go find another Jaylen Warren, because it's not always that easy. I mean, Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell football is not too far in the rearview mirror. It is not an easy thing to find Jaylen Warrens. That's why it makes it so exciting watching him play and exciting seeing him succeed. And I do agree with you that I think that whoever leads the Steelers when it comes to carries this year, it is not going to be a wide margin. It might be 52% to 48%, but I do think it's going to be a much more even split going into the season. And that's the difference between this year and last year. Last year, you went into the year and everybody was excited about Jaylen Warren, but at the same time, it was fully understood that Najee Harris is a workhorse running back, and he's going to continue to do that. And then they're going to get Jaylen Warren in whenever they can. This year, I think it's going to be a much more concerted effort, as you alluded to from week 1 on, to split those carries as evenly as possible. And then at the end of the day, by the second half, you're riding the hot hand. Who has been running the ball better? Whose plays have been working better? I think that's what Arthur Smith's going to end up doing. And I do think that at the end of the day, it's going to lean more towards Jaylen Warren being the guy that gets the bulk majority of the carries. And again, bulk majority being 52 to 48% of the touches.
Yeah, I agree. It'll look just like, hey, who are we playing? We're playing very offensive heavy teams, very dominant running teams. Cool. You could play a certain style of football and slow things down, and that's what the Pittsburgh Steelers will do. But at the same time, you're going to want some explosiveness. You're going to want a guy who could catch the football out of the backfield as reliable as anybody else. That's Jaylen Warren. You're going to want those guys. You're going to want to have to keep up, or you're going to have to keep up with teams like the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas. And Jaylen Warren's the guy that keeps up with the Kansas City Chiefs on Christmas and the Philadelphia Eagles and all of those teams in the second half of the season. I see a couple of comments in here about how Jaylen Warren is not Maurice Jones-Drew. Please don't take that literally. just meant body size.
Light comparison.
Yeah, like it was not a Jaylen Warren is as good as Maurice Jones-Drew. It was Jaylen Warren. When you watch him play, you could compare the way he utilizes his body to Maurice Jones-Drew. Go watch Jaylen Warren light somebody up as a blocker, and then go watch Maurice Jones-Drew light somebody up as a blocker, and tell me that you don't get a little nostalgic watching those two highlights. I'm not saying that he's as good as Maurice Jones-Drew.
Perfect play. Go back to the Bengals game and watch Calvin Austin's touchdown. That's all you need to see.
Exactly. Perfect example. I think that the switch happens very gradually. I don't think that Najee takes a back seat to anybody. I still think this is a 1-2 punch. But if the Steelers are thinking, just in the terms of where Garvin is going with this, as in the Steelers need to know where they're going in the future, I just say by the end of the season, Jaylen Warren gives them a reason that they don't have to negotiate with Najee Harris. They could just tender Jaylen Warren and then try to draft somebody or find somebody in free agency or something to where they have a running back too, but they're pretty confident Jaylen could be the guy. And just watching Jaylen in practice, man, like, we get some glimpses of it in games. We get a lot of glimpses of it in games. If you go watch this man practice, they used to say this about Antonio Brown. Like, if you watch Antonio Brown practice, you know how great he's going to be. If you watch Jaylen Warren practice, you understand how much more is in front of him than behind him. And I think that we're going to get it this year because he looks even better this year than he has in years past. That's where I stand with Jaylen Warren. Again, please don't take Maurice Jones-Drew comparisons seriously. I'm just using body size and where they are. All right. With that said, that's all I got to talk about. Let's answer some questions. If you guys have more of them, please toss them in the chat. We love answering all the questions we could possibly answer before we head out of here. What do we got?
Let's start with Potato Salad, who says, are you worried about maybe a sophomore from JPJ now that teams have an offseason of film, or do you think our addition of PQ and the pressure rate will keep any slump to a minimum?
Yeah, I think that the slump will be a minimum. I don't know how much the rest of the defense is going to benefit Joey Porter Jr. as much as an offense is going to benefit Joey Porter Jr. I look at Russell Wilson and Arthur Smith and an offensive line as the building blocks to improving your defense, because the Steelers defense all year last year had to answer questions for the last 3 years, really, how tough is it to just watch your offense go 4 and out or 3 and out? How exhausted are you by the end of games? This year, if you have an offense, your defense is well rested. They're playing with a little bit more oomph. They got more gas in the fourth quarter. Joey Porter Jr. will benefit from that. So will the rest of the defense. I also look at the pressures, like you said, as something that is going to help greatly. I look at Minkah Fitzpatrick not having to do as much. That's going to help Joey Porter Jr. I look at Dante Jackson as a viable option, which is going to help him along with Cam Sutton. I just look at the defense as a whole and say this all benefits Joey Porter Jr. I still expect him to shadow wide receiver ones, which will put a lot of pressure on him, but he's a lockdown corner in my eyes until proven otherwise. And I'm going to stick with that expectation. So I'm saying minimal slump.
ZYE says, is DeMarvin Leal's only option for a roster spot at edge rusher 4 if Marcus Golden doesn't re-sign? What's most likely for a guy like Leal?
I don't see Leal bumping to the outside right now. He hasn't shown that he's going to bump to the outside as of OTAs and minicamp. He's put on some muscle and he looks a little bit leaner, but he looks just as big. The Steelers are going to try to make him a defensive tackle and utilize him as a pass rusher behind a guy like Larry Ogunjobi or Cam Hayward and hope that he takes a step forward. It's more of a matter of can he than finding the right position. Is he capable of taking a step forward on the inside? If not, I don't know if the Steelers have a place for him. I don't know what the future holds for DeMarvin Leal. I think DeMarvin Leal has a lot of potential. I just don't think it's working out in Pittsburgh. I would like to see it work out in Pittsburgh because he has a lot of potential. But I also think that if you're in late August and DeMarvin Leal isn't a guy that's going to contribute more than 25% or is not going to contribute more than 25% of your defensive snaps a game, you're probably looking for a trade so that you could fill that position with somebody who you could utilize and also get something back for somebody that just isn't working out.
Pittsburgh Hornets wants to know, with your early predictions, who do you think is going to be the most improved player for the Steelers this year?
Oh, that's a tough one. All right, I think candidates. We'll go candidates first. Pat Fryermuth's definitely on there. I think he might be top of the list, but he's definitely on there. Calvin Austin is also certainly on there. Oh, the defensive side of the football. Let's think defensive side of the football here. Who we got? I would say Minka, most improved from last year to this year, but you're dealing with injuries at the same time. That's a massive one. I would say those are Nick Herbig. Nick Herbig's another one. But year 1 to year 2, I mean, that's more of a rookie jump there. I'm going to say Pat Fryermuth is my most improved player. Calvin Austin is number 2, and then Minka, Nick Herbig. And that's like, they're all like 1, 2, 3, 4 should be phenomenal. But I'm going to go those 4.
Chad wants to know, will Calvin Austin get a legit shot at being a number 2 receiver at some point this season?
I do think he gets an actual opportunity to be wide receiver 2. I think Calvin Austin will go into training camp with some opportunity to earn that wide receiver 2 spot if the Steelers don't make a move before training camp, which I don't think that they're going to until early August, late August, depending on when another team is open to discussion. But for right now, yeah, I think Calvin Austin does get an opportunity. I hope he takes advantage of it. I think this is a big growth year for Calvin Austin. I think in a good offense, he's going to have more opportunities. The Steelers held him back last year for a number of reasons. They liked Allen Robinson. Matt Canada didn't really know how to utilize a guy like Calvin Austin. His offense wasn't complex enough for a guy like Calvin Austin. This year in an Arthur Smith offense, you're going to be able to be a gadget guy. You're going to be able to be a deep threat. And you're probably going to get used like Cordero Patterson all over the place. So I think Calvin Austin has a legit shot to be a wide receiver 2. I don't know if he's going to win it or not, but he's going to get an opportunity.
Aaron Ball wants to know, what is the best training camp practice to go to in your opinion?
I mean, Friday Night Lights is the obvious answer because you get everything going on and it's it's under the lights and they usually do a little scrimmage at some point, and it's a good. I mean, last year Kendrick Green ran through a couple of dudes as a fullback, which was awesome to watch. That's always a good time. The energy is always really lively. The first week of pads is my go-to. Like the first padded practice of training camp, which is, I want to say the first practice of week 2. So you go Thursday, Friday. I believe it's like the Tuesday or Wednesday of the next week. That's my favorite one because everybody's hyped up. It's the first time you're putting pads on. You're doing backs on backers. You're doing wide receivers versus corners. That's when the Joey Porter Jr. versus George Pickens rivalry started in training camp last year. That's my that's my favorite practice of the year. After that, you're kind of guessing on whether or not they're going to have pads on, so it gets a little iffy. Friday Night Lights, they always have pads on. They always make it as explosive as possible, so that's a good one. I would say one of those two is my go-to.
I'll add to this here. What is your one training camp tip for anybody that hasn't gone so far in their lifetime to Latrobe?
Bring sunscreen. Bring a lot of sunscreen. Bring sunscreen. Make sure that you're hydrated. Like it's hot. It is hot in Latrobe. It is that the sun is beating down. There is never a day where you're coming home going, oh, that was nice and refreshing. You know, it's one of those times where you're sitting there pouring sweat. So bring some sunscreen and bring some water, but ultimately have a great time because they have the whole fan section set up at the top, and it's training camp's awesome. It's the best time of the year.
That's a wrap on the questions we have for today.
Awesome. With that said, guys, we are going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcast. And as always, please find all of our work at si.com/NFL/Steelers. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.